I collapsed on my parents' kitchen floor, gasping for air, and they told me to stop performing. My own brother filmed it for laughs, but I'm a respiratory therapist, and the number on my oximeter would soon turn all their faces to ash. Before we get back to today's story, I have some exciting news to share. We have officially launched a brand new channel called Layer of Lies. Over there, we are dedicating our platform to bringing you the most satisfying, jaw-dropping corporate revenge stories on the internet. We're diving deep into cutthroat office politics, backstabbing bosses, toxic coworkers, and the incredible women who turned the tables and came out on top. Grab your coffee, because we are serving all the boardroom drama with full context, community reactions, and top-tier narration that brings every power move to life. Make sure to subscribe to Layer of Lies right now so you don't miss out. You'll find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag. Thank you for your continued support as we grow this community. Now, back to the story. There is a particular smell to my mother's kitchen on a Sunday, and even now, after everything, I cannot separate it from the memory of that afternoon. Roasting chicken. Rosemary from the little pot she keeps on the windowsill, the one I bought her 3 birthdays ago. The faint sweetness of the apple pie cooling on the counter, the pie I had gotten up at 6 that morning to bake, because my mother's hands don't work the way they used to, and because, for reasons I am only now learning to forgive myself for, I have spent my entire adult life trying to be useful enough to be loved. I was standing at the stove, stirring gravy with a wooden spoon, when it started. It began the way it always begins, which is to say quietly, deceptively, like a rumor you can almost ignore. A tightness low in my chest, a sense that the air in the room had thinned without anyone opening a window. I have a genetic condition, hereditary angioedema, though nobody in my family has ever bothered to learn the words. And what it means in plain language is that sometimes, without warning, the tissues in my body swell. Sometimes it's my hands. Sometimes it's my face. And sometimes, on the days that frighten me, it's my throat, the soft passage that carries air to my lungs, closing slowly like a fist tightening around a straw. I set the spoon down. I remember that clearly. I set it down gently on the little ceramic rest my mother keeps by the burner, because even in the first seconds of panic, some polite, well-trained part of me did not want to make a mess. "Mom," I said. My voice already sounded wrong to me, higher and thinner. "Mom, I think I need my medication." "It's in my bag in the hall." My mother, Susan, did not look up from the table where she was arranging napkins. "In a minute, Maeve, can you not do this today?" "Do this? I want you to understand something. I am 34 years old. I have spent 11 years working as a respiratory therapist. I have knelt on the floors of emergency rooms with my hands on the chests of strangers, coaxing air into bodies that had forgotten how to take it. I know what an airway sounds like when it is losing its argument with the world. I know it from the inside and the outside both. And I knew, standing in that warm kitchen with the pie cooling and the gravy going cold, that I was in trouble. "Please," I managed. The word came out on the last of a breath I couldn't fully finish. The blue case. My throat. My father, Frank, was in the living room in his recliner, and he called out over the sound of the television without turning around. "Susan, is she starting up again? We talked about this." "We talked about this?" I lowered myself to the floor. Not fell, not yet. Lowered deliberately, the way you teach patients to do, getting low so that if you go down you don't hit your head. My knees found the cold tile. My hand found the cabinet door. And I felt it then, unmistakable, the swelling in my throat, that horrible sensation of trying to breathe through a coffee straw pinched between 2 fingers. The edges of the room went soft and bright. My brother, Ryan, came into the kitchen. I saw his sneakers first. Then, when I lifted my head, I saw the thing that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. My little brother, 29 years old, standing over me with his phone held up horizontally, filming. "Oh my God, she's doing the whole thing again," he said, and he was laughing. Not cruelly, even that's the part that took me longest to understand. He was laughing the easy, careless laugh of someone who genuinely, sincerely believed there was nothing here to be afraid of. Wesley said she'd escalate if we kept feeding into it. Watch, just don't react. Maeve, come on, get up. The chicken's gonna burn. I could not get up. I could not tell him the chicken was going to burn. I could not tell him anything because I no longer had the breath to make words, and the terrible irony of it. That I, of all people, the one who does this for a living, was going to suffocate on my mother's kitchen floor while my family watched me like a bad performance. That irony landed on me with the full weight of a lifetime. My bag was 11 feet away in the hall. 11 feet. I had counted that distance 1,000 times without ever knowing I was counting it. And in that bag was the injection that could save my life. And none of the 3 people who shared my blood would walk those 11 feet to get it. That was the moment I understood, with a clarity that hurt worse than my closing throat, that my family had never once believed me about anything, and that I had spent 34 years auditioning for people who had already decided I would never get the part. I did not die on that floor, obviously, or you would not be hearing this from me. What saved me was habit. Not love, not family, not the mercy of anyone in that house, habit. Because I am a respiratory therapist, and because I have hereditary angioedema, I do not go anywhere without a second dose of my medication, and I do not go anywhere without a small fingertip pulse oximeter clipped into the inside pocket of my cardigan. It's the size of a chip clip. It costs about $40. And in that moment, with my vision narrowing and my brother's phone hovering above me, I did the only thing my failing brain could still organize my hands to do. I pulled it out and I put it on my finger. I did it, I think, for myself. To know. Because there is a specific dignity in knowing the truth of your own body even when no one around you will grant it to you. The little screen lit up. And the number it showed me was 81. If that number means nothing to you, let me translate. A healthy person sitting in a warm kitchen reads 97, 98, 99. 81 is the number of a person whose body is being starved. 81 is a number that, on my unit at the hospital, brings people running. 81 is not an act. I held that little glowing screen up toward my mother. It was all I had left. I couldn't speak, so I let the number speak. My mother glanced at it. I will never forget the exact quality of her glance. The way her eyes touched the number and then slid off it, the way you'd glance at a lottery ticket you already knew was a loser. Maeve, she said, and her voice had that tired, disappointed softness that had governed my entire childhood. You can buy those things anywhere. Wesley says you probably just fiddle with it. Honey, you have to want to be well. You have to want to be well. I want you to sit with that because I have sat with it for a long time. My throat was closing. The device on my finger, a piece of certified medical equipment I use every single day of my professional life, was reading a number that meant emergency, and my mother's response was to suggest I had rigged it. That I wanted to be sick. That some man named Wesley, whom I had at that point met exactly twice, understood the inside of my body better than the machine measuring it and better than I did. Somehow, and this part is a blur even now, I got a hand into my cardigan's other pocket, where I keep the backup auto-injector for exactly the kind of day my family swore couldn't be real. Somehow I got the cap off. Somehow I pressed it to my thigh through my jeans and felt the sting and the cold flood of the medication going in. And then I lay on the cool tile and I breathed, in tiny sips at first and then in deeper pulls, and I watched the number on my finger crawl upward. 83, 86, 90, 94. The whole time my brother kept filming. My mother went back to the napkins. My father never left his chair. When I could finally sit up, propped against the cabinet with sweat cooling on my forehead, my mother looked at me and sighed the sigh of a woman whose dinner had been inconvenienced. "Well," she said. "Are you finished? Should we eat?" I looked at the oximeter still clipped to my finger. 96 now. The truth, glowing quietly, indifferent to whether anyone believed it. I unclipped it and closed my hand around it, and the little plastic edges pressed into my palm, and I thought, this thing tells the truth even when the people who are supposed to love me won't. It was a strange, cold thought to have on the floor of my childhood home, but it was the first honest thought I'd had in years, and I held onto it the way I was holding onto that little device, tightly, secretly, like something I might need again. I did not stay for dinner. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel, and twice I had to pull over onto the shoulder because I couldn't see the road through what was happening to my face. And when I got home, I did something I had never done before in my whole careful, dutiful life. I sat on my kitchen floor, my own kitchen, in my own small apartment, and I did not clean up, and I did not call to check that my parents had eaten, and I did not apologize to anyone. I just breathed, in and out, proving to myself over and over that I still could. To understand how it got to that floor, you have to understand who I had been for my family and for how long. My parents had me young, and then they waited 11 years and had Ryan, and the difference in how they held us was not subtle. I was the practiced child, the responsible one, the one who was expected to understand. Ryan was the miracle, the surprise, the one who was allowed to be. I don't say this bitterly, or I'm trying not to. I say it because it's the load-bearing wall of everything that came after. When you raise one child to be useful and one child to be delighted in, you should not be surprised at what each of them becomes. I became useful. Ferociously, compulsively useful. When my father's back gave out and he had to leave the plant, I was the one who quietly started covering their mortgage shortfall out of my paychecks. Not for a month, not for a year, but for 6 years running. When my mother's arthritis made driving hard, I was the one who took a job at the regional hospital 40 minutes from my own apartment, specifically, so I could pass through their town twice a day and take her to her appointments. I set up their pill organizers. I did their taxes. I sat on hold with their insurance company for hours that added up, over the years, into weeks of my life. And I did it while managing a condition that could kill me, a condition I inherited, incidentally, from my father's side of the family, from a grandmother who, family legend has it, was always dramatic about her health. I used to wonder why nobody in my family took my swelling seriously. It took me a long time to see that they had been trained not to, generations ago, by people who preferred to call a genetic disorder a character flaw. Ryan, meanwhile, drifted. Jobs came and went. There was always a reason it wasn't his fault. My parents refinanced their house once to cover a business opportunity of his that evaporated within the year. I said nothing. I always said nothing. I told myself that keeping the peace was a kind of love, and maybe it was, but it was also a kind of surrender, and I could not always tell the two apart. And then, about a year ago, Ryan met Wesley Cole. I want to be careful here because it would be easy to make Wesley a cartoon, and the truth is more frightening than a cartoon. Wesley Cole was, and is, a wellness and manifestation coach. That's the phrase on his website, over a photo of him on a beach in white linen, arms open to the sunrise. He ran something called the Cole Method, a program of workshops and one-on-one breakthrough sessions, and a monthly subscription to his inner circle, all built on a single, seductive, poisonous idea: that illness is a choice, that the body only fails when the mind gives it permission. That pain is a message, sickness is unprocessed emotion, and anyone who is truly sick is, on some level, choosing to be, usually for attention. You can imagine how a family already primed to see my illness as drama received a man who had turned that exact belief into a philosophy with a price tag. Ryan fell in completely. Then my parents. Wesley started coming to Sunday dinners. And the first time I met him, I felt the small, cold click of professional instinct that I would spend the next year trying to talk myself out of. The tell was in his backstory. He mentioned, that first dinner, that he'd trained in respiratory medicine before he woke up to the limits of the Western model. I do respiratory medicine. I asked him pleasantly where he'd trained, what program, what certification. He waved a hand. Oh, it was more of an apprenticeship model, you wouldn't have heard of it. The second time I met him, the respiratory training had become years in the wellness field. And when I gently noted that those were different things, he smiled at me the way you'd smile at a child who'd interrupted, and he told the whole table, Maeve's very attached to her credentials. That's okay. We hold space for that. We hold space for that. The other tell was money. I noticed it slowly, the way you notice a leak, first a stain, then a warp in the wood. My mother mentioned that they'd invested in Ryan's mindset journey. A charge appeared on the household budget I still helped manage, $900 monthly, to something called CM Holdings. When I asked, my father said it was an education thing and told me not to worry about it. Wesley began suggesting, at dinners, that my parents' energy would clear up if they simplified their finances, if they released their attachment to hoarded resources. He said the word inheritance once, lightly, laughing, and then never again, but I heard it, and my instinct heard it, and I filed it away with the number 81 and the smell of rosemary and the sound of my brother laughing while I lay on the floor. I didn't know yet what I was going to do about any of it, but I knew, sitting on my own kitchen floor that night, that the useful daughter was finished. Something else was about to take her place. For 3 days after the kitchen floor, nobody in my family called me. I want to be precise about that because the silence was its own kind of message. I had nearly died in their home, and their response was not concern but a kind of collective sulking, as if I had ruined a nice afternoon with my selfishness. On the 4th day, my mother texted. I have the message still. It said, "Wesley says you owe the family an apology for the disruption. He's willing to do a session with you to work through your need for attention. We think that's very generous." I read that text standing in the break room at work, in my scrubs, with a cup of terrible coffee in my hand, having just spent the morning helping a 68-year-old man with COPD relearn how to breathe after a bad night. And I laughed. Not a happy laugh. The laugh of something breaking loose. Because here is what my family had forgotten, in their long habit of seeing me as the useful furniture of their lives. I am not helpless. I am, in fact, extremely good at exactly the thing that could take Wesley Cole apart. My whole career is built on the difference between what is real and what is performed, on the numbers that don't lie, on documentation, on knowing how the human body actually works when nobody is manifesting anything at all. I stopped being the victim in that break room. I became something my family had never once imagined I could be because they'd never bothered to look. I became a threat. I started with what I knew. First, I saved everything, the text from my mother. And then, this is the part that mattered, I remembered Ryan's video. He'd filmed me on the floor. I'd been so ashamed I hadn't even thought about it, but now I did, and I realized that in his cruelty he had created evidence. I called him, keeping my voice light, and asked if he'd sent that video anywhere. Proud of himself, he said he'd posted it in Wesley's inner circle group as a case study in psychosomatic behavior. He even sent me the clip, still laughing about it. I watched it once, which was all I could bear. And there, in the corner of the frame, clear as anything, was my hand holding up the oximeter. The number was small but legible if you enlarged it. 81, then later the climb as the medication worked. My brother had filmed and distributed video proof of a genuine medical emergency and labeled it a performance. That video, I understood, was not my humiliation. It was Wesley Cole's problem. Then I called Jenna. Jenna Carter and I had gone through respiratory therapy training together a decade earlier, and she'd since crossed over to become a paramedic, and there is no one on this earth I trust more with the truth of a bad situation. I told her everything over tacos at the place near the hospital, and she put her fork down halfway through and didn't pick it up again. "Maeve," she said, "you know what this is, right? This isn't just a jerk taking your family's money. A guy telling people to skip their meds and manifest their way out of anaphylaxis. People die from that. This is the kind of thing the state medical board and the attorney general's consumer fraud people actually care about." "He's not a doctor," I said. "He can't lose a license he doesn't have." "No," Jenna said, "but he claims medical training to sell services. That's a claim. Claims can be checked. And when a claim is false and you took money on the strength of it, that has a name, and the name is fraud." She leaned forward. "You want help? Because I've got a cousin who's a nurse case manager and knows how to pull a provider's actual credentialing history, and I've got a friend at the county paper who eats stuff like this for breakfast. You are not doing this alone." I felt something unknot in my chest that had nothing to do with my airway. For 34 years, I had been the one who helped. I had never once let anyone help me. "Okay," I said, my voice cracked on the word. "Okay, yes." Over the next 2 weeks, quietly, without my family knowing anything at all, we built. Jenna's cousin ran Wesley's name through every credentialing and licensing database that exists: medical, nursing, respiratory, even the vague catch-all certified health coach registries. He appeared in none of them. Not one. The man who told my parents he'd trained in respiratory medicine had no verifiable training in anything. His LLC, CM Holdings, was registered in a state he'd never lived in, and there was a curious pattern to its filings. It had been dissolved and reincorporated under slightly different names 3 times in 5 years. A business doesn't shed its skin like that unless something keeps needing to be left behind. And then Jenna's friend at the paper, a reporter named Dana, made a single phone call that changed everything. "There's a woman," Dana told me. "She's been trying to get someone to listen for a year. Her mother was in Wesley's program in his last town under his last business name. Her mother had heart failure and he convinced her that her medication was blocking her healing. She stopped taking it." Dana paused. "Her name was Alina. She died 14 months ago. And her daughter has been sending emails to reporters ever since, and nobody would touch it, because it's hard to prove and Wesley's very good with words." I sat down when she said that, because I understood, suddenly, that this was not about my dignity or my family's cruelty or $900 a month. Somewhere out there was a daughter who had lost her mother the way I had almost lost myself, and I had the one thing that daughter had never had. I had the credentials, the documentation, the video, and the standing to be believed. The useful daughter was gone for good now. In her place was someone with a plan. I decided to start with Ryan because Ryan was the crack in the wall. He wasn't evil. I need to keep saying that because it would be simpler if he were. Ryan was weak and adrift and desperate to belong to something that made him feel chosen, and Wesley had offered him exactly that. But Ryan was also, underneath the nonsense, still my little brother, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike because our father was too tired and our mother too anxious. If there was a way to reach anyone in my family, it was him. I asked him to lunch. Neutral ground, a diner halfway between us. He came, wary, already in defense posture, already rehearsing Wesley's phrases. "If this is about the video, Maeve, honestly, you need to look at why you're so reactive." "Ryan," I said, "I need you to look at something, and then you can say whatever you want." I put my tablet on the table and I played his own video, but a version Jenna had helped me prepare, zoomed and enhanced, with the oximeter readings circled and enlarged so there was no missing it. 81. And beside it, on a split screen, a clip from a training video I use with new staff, showing what a reading like that means, what happens in the body, how many minutes a person has. He watched it. His face did a complicated thing. "That's edited," he said, but weakly. "It's your video, Ryan, your footage. I just made the number big enough for you to see. 81. Do you know what that is? That's the number that means I was 10, maybe 15 minutes from not being able to breathe at all, in Mom's kitchen, while you filmed it and called it a case study." I kept my voice level, the way I do with frightened patients. "I'm not asking you to believe me because I'm your sister. I'm asking you to believe the number. The number doesn't want anything from you. The number can't manipulate you. It just is." And then I did the thing I'd planned, the small, surgical reveal I'd chosen precisely because it would land on him and not on Wesley. I slid a single printed page across the table. It was the credentialing search result. A clean official summary showing that Wesley Cole held no license, no certification, no training in any medical or health field whatsoever, anywhere in the country. "He told you he trained in respiratory medicine," I said quietly. "He told me that too. That's my actual field, Ryan, so I checked, not to win an argument, because if a man is going to teach our parents that their prescriptions are poison, I wanted to know what he'd trained in. And the answer is nothing. He has trained in nothing." Ryan stared at the page for a long time. I watched a year of certainty wobble on its foundation. And then, because Wesley had built these people well, he grabbed for the last handhold. Even if the paperwork's not there, that doesn't mean the knowledge isn't real. Wesley says credentials are just gatekeeping. "Ryan," I said, "a woman named Alina believed that. She had heart failure. Wesley told her the pills were blocking her healing, and she stopped taking them, and she died 14 months ago, and her daughter has spent every day since then trying to get anyone to listen. I let that sit. I'm going to be the one who listens. I'd like you to be on the right side of this when it comes out, but I understand if you can't be. I just needed you to see the number. And the page, that's all. I paid the check and I left him there. I didn't push. You don't push a spell, you crack it and let the light do its own work. I didn't have to wait long to learn that the crack had traveled, because Ryan, being Ryan, did not sit quietly with what I'd shown him. He took it straight to Wesley, not to accuse him, but to be reassured, to be told it wasn't true. And Wesley's reaction told me everything I already knew. He called me. Wesley Cole, who had never once called me, called my personal phone that same evening, and the charming beach linen voice was gone. "I understand you've been doing some research," he said, and he made the words sound obscene. "Let me give you some free advice, Maeve, since you clearly need it. Your parents are grown adults who have made their own choices. You're a bitter, sick woman who can't stand that your family found peace without your permission. If you keep spreading these lies about me, I will sue you into the ground, and I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of unstable person you are. You people always overplay your hand." I let him finish, and then I said the only thing I said the entire call. "Wesley, I'm recording this and my state allows one-party consent. Thank you. This is very helpful." The silence on the other end was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in years. Then the line went dead. He'd threatened me. He'd revealed his real face. And best of all, he'd done it in a way I could keep. The man who traded in fake certainties had just handed me a very real one. Wesley Cole did not go quietly, and I never expected him to. Cornered animals rarely do. His first move was to tighten his grip on my parents. Within days, my mother called me, the first call in weeks, and it was not to ask how I was. It was to inform me, in a voice that was clearly reading from a script, that the family had discussed my behavior and decided that until I was ready to take accountability and stop attacking Ryan's mentor, I would not be welcome at Sunday dinners. Wesley, she said, had graciously offered to lead the family through this difficult season of my resistance. I recognized the tactic even as it wounded me. This is what these people do. When someone gets close to the truth, they isolate the loved ones, they cut the lines of contact, they make the whistleblower the villain so that no warning from her can be heard as anything but spite. Wesley was walling my parents off from me, and he was using their own hurt feelings as the bricks. His second move was money, and this was the one that frightened me. Dana, the reporter, had a source inside the bank my parents used, nothing improper, just a teller who'd flagged, out of genuine concern, an elderly couple being pressured into a large transfer. Wesley had convinced my parents to take out a home equity line and invest $30,000 into a new tier of his program, something called the Legacy Circle, pitched as securing their spiritual and financial future. $30,000. From people whose mortgage I had quietly been covering for 6 years because they didn't have it to spare. He was draining them. And the isolation wasn't a side effect of the draining, it was the method. Cut off the one person who managed their money and knew their finances, and you have a clear runway to the account. But here is the thing about desperation. It makes people sloppy. And while Wesley was busy tightening his grip, we were busy building something he couldn't argue his way out of. Dana connected me with a leaner's daughter, whose name was Rachel. We talked for 2 hours the first time, and I cried, and she cried. And at the end of it, we were not strangers anymore but two people who had looked at the same monster from different sides of the same wound. Rachel had kept everything, texts from Wesley telling her mother to stop her medication, emails about releasing dependence on pharmaceuticals, even a voicemail. She'd never been able to make it into a weapon because she had no medical standing, no credentials, no way to make the documents mean what she knew they meant. I had those things. Together, we were complete. Meanwhile, Jenna's network turned up 2 more former clients from Wesley's earlier incarnations, a man who'd been talked out of chemotherapy who was, thank God, still alive and furious, and a woman who'd handed over her late husband's insurance settlement for a healing intensive that turned out to be a weekend at a rented cabin. A pattern is one thing. 4 people is not a pattern. 4 people is a case. I compiled all of it. This is what I'm good at. Remember documentation, the patient chart, the record that outlives anyone's story. I built a single organized file, the credentialing search proving no training, the corporate filings showing the serial name changes, my mother's texts, Wesley's threatening call, recorded, Ryan's video with the oximeter, Rachel's evidence, the statements of the 2 other victims. I made copies. I gave one to Jenna, one to Dana, and I sent one, formally, to the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division and to the county's Elder Financial Abuse Unit, because my parents were, whether they'd admit it or not, exactly the vulnerable people those units exist to protect. And then I did one more thing, the thing that would set up everything that came after. I called my father. Not my mother, who was too far under. My father, Frank, who had sat in his recliner while I fought for air, but who was also, I gambled, a man whose pride would not survive learning he'd been played for a fool. I didn't accuse. I didn't plead. I said only this. Dad, I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to sit in a room one time and look at some documents and then decide for yourself. If I'm wrong, you never have to hear from me about Wesley again. If I'm right, you'll want to have seen it with your own eyes before it's too late for the money and maybe for more than the money. 1 room, 1 hour. That's all I want. There was a long silence on the line. My father is not a talker. And then he said, gruffly, "Your mother won't like it." I know. 1 hour, he said. And you don't ambush me. No ambush, I said. Just the truth in a room with the door open. I hung up and I sat very still. I took the oximeter out of my cardigan pocket and I looked at it, that little $40 machine that had told the truth on the kitchen floor when no one else would. I clipped it onto my finger out of pure habit, and it read 98, steady and calm, and I thought, soon everyone in that family is going to have to look at a number they can't argue with. I had the room. I had the hour. I had the truth. Now I just had to get everyone into the same place at the same time. I chose my parents' living room because that was where it had all been decided about me for 34 years, and I wanted it to be where it was undecided. I did not call it an intervention. Wesley would have smelled that word from a mile off and forbidden anyone to attend. Instead, I let my father tell my mother only that Maeve is coming by with some paperwork about the finances, which was true, and which was exactly the kind of dull, dutiful errand they'd always trusted the useful daughter to handle. Ryan came because Ryan, since the diner, had been unable to sleep. I could see it in his face when he opened the door, the puffy exhaustion of a man whose certainty was leaking out of him and who was terrified of what would be left. And Wesley came because I made sure a message reached him, through Ryan, that Maeve is going to accuse you to your parents' faces, and you won't even be there to defend yourself. A man like that cannot resist an audience or a chance to perform his innocence. His need to control the room was the leash I used to walk him into it. So there we were. My father in his recliner, upright this time, not reclined. My mother on the sofa, arms crossed, already braced to be disappointed in me. Ryan by the window, unable to sit. Wesley in the good armchair, of course, in his linen, radiating the serene pity he wore like cologne. And me, standing, with a folder in my hands and Jenna waiting in her car outside, and my phone recording, and every document I had spent a month assembling. Maeve wants to make some accusations, Wesley announced to the room before I'd said a word, spreading his hands. I want everyone to notice how much anger she's carrying. We're just going to hold space and let her release it, and then we can all move forward in love. Thank you, Wesley, I said pleasantly. I don't have accusations, I have documents. You all can read and you can decide for yourselves. That's all I'm here for. I did not raise my voice once. I want you to understand that. I had imagined in my angrier moments some explosive scene where I screamed the truth and my family finally understood. But that's not how truth works on people who have been lied to. You don't shout them awake. You lay the evidence down, one calm page at a time, and you let the weight of it do what shouting never can. I started with the credentialing report. I handed it to my father first, then my mother. Wesley told all of us he trained in respiratory medicine. That's my field, so I checked every medical, nursing, and health coaching registry in the country. He holds no license and no certification in anything. Not respiratory medicine, not anything. I nodded toward the armchair. Wesley, you're welcome to tell my parents the name of the program you trained in. Right now, I'll wait. Wesley smiled. Credentials are a colonial construct. That's a no, I said gently, and moved on before he could build momentum. I laid down the corporate filings. This is CM Holdings, where the $900 a month goes. It's been dissolved and renamed 3 times in 5 years. Legitimate businesses don't shed their names like that. People running from something do. My mother's arms had begun, very slightly, to uncross. I laid down the bank flag, the $30,000 home equity draw for the legacy circle. My father made a sound low in his chest. He had not, I realized, known the amount. My mother had done that one alone, under Wesley's private counsel. The look that passed between my parents in that moment was the first real crack in a marriage-long alliance against believing me. And then, because Wesley was gathering himself to launch some grand deflection, I played the recording. His own voice filled the living room. You're a bitter, sick woman. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of unstable person you are. You people always overplay your hand. His serene face curdled as he heard himself. My mother flinched at every word. This was not the man who held space in her living room. This was the thing underneath the man. That's out of context, Wesley started, standing now. Then let's add context, I said, and I opened the door. Because the intervention had one more person in it that Wesley didn't know about. I had asked Rachel to wait in the hall, and now she came in and she stood in front of my parents, 2 people her mother's age, and she said, in a voice that shook and did not break, "My name is Rachel." 14 months ago, this man told my mother her heart medication was blocking her healing. She believed him. She stopped taking it. She died in March. I have his texts telling her to do it. She looked at Wesley then, and the whole room turned with her, and Wesley Cole, the manifestation coach, the man who taught that the body only fails when the mind allows it, went the color of ash. Pale. Bloodless. Every drop of that beach linen serenity drained out of his face at once. That was the moment my parents turned pale too, but it was a different pale. Theirs was the pale of people realizing, all at once, whom they had let into their home and near their money and near their sick daughter on a kitchen floor. My mother put her hand over her mouth. My father stood up out of his recliner, and I hadn't seen him stand that fast in years. And Ryan, my little brother, adrift and desperate to belong, crossed the room. Not to Wesley. To Rachel. He said, "I'm so sorry about your mom." And then he turned to the armchair and he said, in the smallest, steadiest voice I'd ever heard from him, "Get out of my parents' house." Wesley tried, one last time, to spin it, to talk about lawsuits and lies, and how we'd all regret attacking a healer. But there was no oxygen left in the room for his words. He'd finally met a set of numbers and facts, and a grieving daughter's testimony that no amount of language could dissolve. He gathered his linen and his fury and he left, and the door closing behind him was the quietest, most enormous sound I have ever heard. The consequences came the way real consequences usually do, not in a single thunderclap, but steadily, and from every direction at once, until there was nowhere left for a man like Wesley Cole to stand. The file I'd sent to the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division had, it turned out, landed on a desk that had already received 2 other complaints about Wesley under his older business names. My documentation, with its medical framing and its organized proof, gave them the spine of a case they'd been missing. Within 4 months, the state filed charges, multiple counts of fraud, practicing outside any recognized scope while claiming medical training, and because of Rachel, and because of the 2 other victims Jenna had found, the Elder Financial Abuse Unit opened its own parallel investigation into the money he'd taken from vulnerable people. His assets were frozen. CM Holdings, in all its shed skins, was finished. Then Dana's article ran. She'd done it properly, carefully, lawyer-reviewed, the coach with no credentials, the serial business names, the woman who died, the daughter who wouldn't stop. It was picked up regionally and then more widely, and the beach linen photos that had lured people in became, overnight, the face everyone was warned about. His inner circle dissolved. His remaining clients scattered. The man who had built his entire empire on being believed discovered that once the belief is gone, there is nothing underneath at all. That was his real ruin, not the courtroom, though that came too, but the simple fact that no one would ever again mistake him for what he'd claimed to be. My parents got most of the $30,000 back through the bank's fraud process, once the criminal case gave them the standing to claw it back. It wasn't all of it. Some money never comes home. But enough did that they were not ruined, and I, for the first time in 6 years, stopped covering their mortgage shortfall, not out of anger, but because they insisted, my father especially, that they would not take one more dollar from a daughter they had let lie on a kitchen floor. It was, I understood, his way of apologizing without knowing the words. My father was never going to know the words. My mother, though, my mother tried. It did not happen all at once, and I want to be honest about that, because the sweeping, tearful reunion is a lie families tell themselves. What happened was slower and truer. She called me a few weeks after Wesley was gone, and she couldn't quite get to "I'm sorry," but she got to "I keep seeing you on that floor. I keep seeing that little number you held up." I don't know how I looked at it and looked away. And I let that be enough for that day, because it was a real thing and I had learned, finally, to stop demanding that people love me perfectly before I'd let them love me at all. We rebuilt in small pieces. She came to my apartment. She had never once been to my apartment in the years I'd been driving to hers, and she sat at my kitchen table and let me make her lunch, and it undid something in me to be, for once, the one whose home was entered. Ryan changed the most, and the fastest, the way people do when a false belief they'd built their identity on collapses. He was ashamed in a way that was hard to watch, but the shame turned into something useful. He went with me twice to speak at a small support meeting Rachel started for families of wellness fraud victims. He tells the story of the video now, of filming his own sister's emergency and calling it an act, and he does not spare himself in the telling. I think it's the bravest thing he's ever done. As for me, I keep the oximeter in my cardigan still. I always will, but it means something different now. For a long time, it had been the only thing in my life that told me the truth, the one witness that couldn't be argued with when the people who were supposed to love me looked away. Now, when I clip it on out of habit and watch it read 98, steady and calm, it isn't a lonely thing anymore. It's just a small machine doing its small, honest job, while all around me the people in my life have finally, slowly, learned to do theirs, which is to look at the truth of me and not look away. I nearly suffocated on my mother's kitchen floor while my family filmed it and called it a performance. It should have been the worst day of my life. In a strange way, it was the day my life actually began. The day the useful daughter finally set herself down, gently, on the counter, like a wooden spoon she no longer had to hold.